So here's the thing, content creation has become a significant aspect of Nigeria's entertainment and media industry, with many young creatives leveraging platforms like YouTube, like Instagram and TikTok to showcase their talents. However, while content creation can be a fun and creative outlet, it's also a big business that requires strategic thinking, planning, and execution. Plus, it's not the only thing when you think of creativity. The question there is content creation the only thing? You know, right now, if you're not doing a 9 to 5, you want to be a content creator, but there's so much more to creativity than content creation. Anyway, this is for Fanwa Africa. This is a youth-based show where we spotlight the challenges, the opportunities of the youth across the African continent, and we try to prefer profound solutions to some of the problems that they face. So stay with us because it's about to be an hour of insightful conversation. Now, in Nigeria, the creative industry is estimated to contribute around 2.3% to the country's GDP, with the potential to grow even further. However, for this growth to be sustainable, young creatives must think beyond just creating content and focus on building a business around their talent. And this requires an understanding of revenue models, funding options, and strategic moves that can help young creatives build wealth. It also requires a mindset shift from seeing content creation as just a hobby or a way to gain fame to seeing it as a business that actually requires hard work, dedication, and a willingness to learn and adapt. So that means that the fact that you're living 9 to 5 for content creation doesn't mean you get lazier. It means you get more strategic. You even work harder, you know, because it's a business of creativity. Anyway, it's not about to be a monologue. I have amazing guests who will be joining us to dissect this conversation in the studio today. First, we have David Adeleke, the founder, Communique, live in the studio. My producer said I should say it's not Davido, it's David Adeleke. Thank you so much, David, for joining us. We also have Harry Kessiena, Country Program Manager, Art and Culture, British Council, with us in the studio as well. Thank you, Harry, for joining us. Okay, so we are going to have this extensive conversation. I want us to start off from content creation in itself and then segue into the business of creativity entirely. So I'll start with David. David, what do you think inspires a lot of people to pursue content creation without even understanding that it is an industry on its own?
Thank you very much for having me again. So I think the biggest reason why a lot of people start a content creation career is because many people think it is easy. They think it's just hold the phone in front of my face, produce content or shoot videos, publish those videos, and then I get popular, I make some money from it. But also for some people, it's an outlet, a way of expressing their creativity. They see other people doing things that they like and they believe that they can do the same thing. And so they try it as well. And then there is the very small subset of people who actually see it as the business that it can be, and I think those are the people that we want to talk a bit more about during today's conversation. So I think those are the three main reasons from my experience why people go into content creation.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So let me, go straight to Harry now, ask about the business of creativity in itself. Now, not many people understand that there is so much more to the creative industry than content creation. How do you think the creative industry contributes to the growth of the economy of the country and the growth of Nigerian youths, particularly?
Thank you once more for having me on the show. Thinking about it really, the creative sectors in Nigeria has become the major drivers of our tourism as a country. And research will show that we now have like 3 major areas that Nigeria is shining on the global stage. You have fashion, you have music, and then you have film. And with that tourism attraction, you see a lot of investment interest in the country, Nigeria. And creativity in itself, or rather the creative economy in itself, has that potential to unlock the economic potential of Nigeria. And it is interesting to see that the government, a lot of private stakeholders, funders as well, are making really, really focused efforts to make sure that the creative sector in Nigeria achieves its full potential. And when you also look at the creative economy, it is not in isolation. The creative economy has to work with other business support sectors as well, say accounting, legal, finance, even compliance, right? So it has a 360 effect and impact on the entire economic outlook of the country. So we cannot continue to ignore the creative economy, and we cannot also undermine the value that this creative economy brings to Nigeria. So yeah.
All right, thank you, Harry, for that, and really spot on, in saying that it cannot be, we cannot underestimate the impact of the creative economy. But anyways, before we continue, we've got news reaching us in the studio now that we'll be bringing to you. All right, news reaching us in the studio confirms that the police have stopped Emir Mohammed Sanusi II from organizing Salah Durbar in Kano as part of the Eid al-Fitr. Now, this comes 24 hours after the 15th Emir of Kano, Aminu Ado Bayero, cancelled the plan to hold the festival, citing security concerns. Just a reminder that this is new information that is reaching us in the studio that confirms that the police have stopped Emir Mohammed Sanusi II from organizing Salah Durbar in Kano as part of the Eid al-Fitr, and it comes 24 hours after the 15th Emir of Kano, Aminu Ado Bayero, cancelled the plan to hold the festival, citing security concerns. And of course, News Central will be following up on that story and bringing you more detail as it unfolds. All right, we continue the conversation. It's still for Fanwa Africa, and we're still talking about the creative industry, the creativity industry in Nigeria, and how a lot of people are either missing out or harnessing the power of creativity in Nigeria. So, David, let me ask, what are some common mistakes that young creatives make, especially when they start off their career as content creators?
I want to speak to the mistakes that people make generally about the creative economy. And one of the biggest mistakes is that they think the only thing to do is content, is to create content. Now, like Harry said earlier, the pillars of the creative economy include accountants, include operations people, people who understand the strategy of the industry, how to get content in front of the right people, how to monetize content. I think that's the big part of it that we don't see a lot of people concern themselves with. And from my experience, and the more I talk to people, the more I do research, the more I see that Nigeria isn't necessarily lacking creative talent. We have we have it in abundance. What we are lacking is people who understand the infrastructure and the systems that make creativity a viable business. For instance, we watch Hollywood movies, we watch Nollywood movies, we really enjoy them. But what we fail to see is that behind the scenes, a lot of people make things work. The people who understand how movies go from screen to screen in cinemas, the people who understand how to market those movies in cinemas to other people. So I think the biggest mistake that I have seen that a lot of people make about the creative economy is that they think the only thing to do is to create content, and that's just very sad.
All right. Again, that's another spot-on observation, because really we've gotten to a point in the creative industry where, when especially the young people, when they say, "Oh, I want to venture into the creative industry," the only thing on their mind is content creation. And I think that's also a limiting factor. But I think I would like to ask Harry, how do you think that young creatives can develop a unique value proposition that will set them apart from others in the industry, especially because the industry is so saturated? You see 10,000 lifestyle bloggers, you see millions of GRWM creators, like a lot of similar content is being pushed out on a daily. And because, again, their knowledge of creativity is limited to just content creation. So how do you think that people can actually set themselves apart in the creativity industry?
Okay, well, it's an interesting question because just before we even came on air, I was speaking to David about a research that we did to look at the various creative art forms that young people are engaging with, because we interact with a lot of 18 to 35-year-olds. We see this period as a peak period where young people are trying out a lot of creative actions, and they are looking at how they can be beneficial and provide for their family. And what we saw from the results of that research was that you have the first stage of creativity, which are the enthusiasts. Um, One of us or either of us had like a creative talent or skill when we were growing up. Maybe we're part of the church choir, or we're part of the church drama, or we realize we can talk very well, we can sing very well, or we have this passion for fashion, you know. And we sort of blossom in that enthusiastic stage of our lives. And as we become older, we are further now divided into two main groups. One, the hobbyists. The hobbyist is mostly driven by the culture of today, where parents do not see like a viable career pathway in the creative sector. There's a lot of advocacy that's going on, with that at the moment, where parents do not see viable pathways, and then the young people are conditioned to either do accounting or medicine, but they still have that creative talent in them. And then you have the second group of people who are professionals. They are the ones that are dogged, that says, no matter what my parents are going to do or think, I'm going to chase that music career. I'm going to make sure I make it to Lagos and be in Nollywood, you know. So we are seeing these results, right? And when you look at it, really, young people do not have the required infrastructure, in quotes, to be able to distinguish what their unique selling point is. They lack the ability to be in a structured environment that takes them through the education of their creativity and their creative art forms. So I think the best ways for young people to actually now differentiate themselves from the other is to look at education, right? How can they really understand their creative art form? How can they really now look at, this is what I'm good at, this is what I can do, right? This is what I need to be able to achieve what I want to achieve. And if that first point of call is education, you generally see that young people that are creatives would identify their various unique selling points that make them stand out, from the other. Yeah.
Mm. Okay, so I'm glad that you talked about education, because that would have been my next question to David. Now, as we've established, a lot of people dabble into content creation. It's not something that they planned, but especially now that they see a lot of their peers being successful in it, they want to try it out. And more often than not, some people are successful. It just varies the number of followers, but sometimes you get engagement, that one viral post that every blog is, reposting. So because of that, we do not exactly have trainings or mentorship or anything that can actually help you structure your content creation or creativity journey, depending on what you're doing. So David, what would you say is the role of training? Because again, let's not forget that this is Nigeria. So once you do something and you're successful, the tendency to want to now go back and actually learn the basics of it is slim. The chances are slim. So what do you think the role of trainings are, or mentorship are, in the success of young creatives?
Thank you for the question. So I think the foundation of all of this is vision or perception or perspective, whatever. People need to know what is possible. The moment they know that it is possible for something to be bigger than it currently is, then you give them the permission, so to speak, to chase more. And I think the British Council is one of the best examples I like to use. This is an entity that has been dedicated to the development of the creative economy in different parts of the world, but primarily here in Nigeria, because we're talking about Nigerian youth. The British Council does a lot of education. They have a lot of programs. I mean, as a matter of fact, we partnered with them for a recent event that we had, where we had a fireside chat. We talked about the relationship between Nollywood and streaming platforms, and then we held a networking event together. I mean, today there's an event currently going on at the British Council, and all of this is around the creative economy. So again, we need to have more entities like this who are interested in giving young people the resources, and not just any kind of resource, but knowledge, helping them know what is possible, giving them the skills, and not just content creation skills, but the skill to understand the ecosystem, the business of creativity, how, for instance, do you go from being a solo creator to a creative entrepreneur? They're not the same thing. A solo creator is someone who has a phone or you have a device, you create the content, you get some brand deals here and there. A creative entrepreneur is someone who runs an actual business. Your business is registered, you pay your taxes, which also helps the government, and the government can provide more infrastructure for you to continue to create and make more money. So all of these different layers need to be factored into the equation. So I think the problem is that not a lot of people have access, or they are even aware that these resources exist, which I think is also partly the job of the media. It's something that I know that I've taken personally as an entrepreneur, is to get people access to resources and the knowledge that helps them go from just creating to building viable businesses.
Okay, again, that's in line with my next question, because I think that it's important that we discuss the business of creativity, because a lot of people do not see it as a business because it's not lucrative for them yet. So the next question will be, how do you think that, and that's to Harry, how do you think that young creatives can be exposed to the idea of actually monetizing their content? Because you go online, and not just content, their creativity generally. You go online, you see someone has a video with millions of views, and in the same country where we have thousands and millions of users of some particular apps, you find out that those apps don't even pay them, for the virality of their content or whatnot. So how do you think that young creatives can come into the realization of the possibility of monetizing their gifts, and how can they go about actually monetizing their creativity?
It's interesting to see that most of the questions that you're about to ask us, either David or myself, prompt some comments from it. Which shows that we are very well aligned, and we just even want to see that the creative economy in Nigeria flourishes. So I would pick it up from the model that the British Council currently operates in terms of how we support young people in Nigeria and in Africa as a whole. I think the first and most important step for any young creative, even given today's current demands and the demands of the future, is awareness. I think young people need to be aware of the power that they have currently, and the best ways in which they can utilize their skills to provide for themselves and their family, and generally for the economy. And this awareness is largely tied to education. We cannot overemphasize the importance of education. Either the education is self-taught, or it's taken the form of mentorship or apprenticeship, or even through formal education. We cannot overemphasize the importance of this. And education unlocks the ability to know what is possible and what is not possible. It enables the young creatives to know the right steps to take. It also enables the young creative to be aware of what is happening in other regions of the world globally. The British Council has I like to call it like a 5-step approach to building and catalyzing the creative economy in Nigeria and Africa. Of course, where we start with the e-learning, where we have now looked at we have actually built an e-learning platform which would enable young creatives to be aware of their potential, their talents, and just even show them the pathway in which they ought to take. And after they go through this e-learning, we are always putting up and bringing together either incubators or accelerators that will enable their gifts and their creativity to flourish, either be it in film, in music, in fashion, in visual arts. There is an incubator or an accelerator that young people should constantly look out for to be a part of. And when they are done with the incubator and the accelerator in whichever regard that they fall into, you now move them into sort of showcasing. Showcasing for us is the ability for these creatives to collaborate and show their work in other regions apart from where it is located. And showcasing your work as a creative does not really mean that you have to move from Nigeria to the US. It can be as simple as moving from Port Harcourt to Lagos, or from Lagos to Abuja. Just show your creative art form to a new set of audience and just get the buy-in of a paying audience that will see value in the work that you do. And as you go further, you move to advocacy, where the government comes in to provide the right structure, to provide the right policies, to provide the right framework that would enable the creative talent of a young person to flourish. So awareness, it has a major part to play in a creative knowing what they ought to do. And to be honest, most of what is required for a young person of this time and age to succeed is on the internet. When you go on Google and then you just type what your interests are, and you also type what is necessary for your growth, I'm sure you see a lot of opportunities available for you to flourish. So I think that is very key and it's important.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So, David, let's talk about balance now, right? We are in a world where automatically you have to work like 2-3 jobs, one main job, 2-3 side gigs, just to be able to, earn a living. And this is the same ecosystem where youths are struggling to find their creativity, to find that one thing they can do, and not just because they want to earn from it, but would be nice to earn from it. And there's this saying when it comes to 9 to 5 that, fund your passion until your passion can fund your lifestyle, something like that. So you have to use where you're working now to at least fund your business, that's your personal business, and then eventually your business can now fund your lifestyle. So how do you think that young people can create that balance between finding their niche in the creative industry and actually working for a living? Because there's a challenge of some young people not even wanting to be 9 to 5ers, and then some people in 9 to 5 want to completely quit their jobs and pursue a creative career, anything in creativity. Unfortunately, mostly is always content creation. Is there a way to balance it, or what do you think?
That's a good question, and I think you're asking the right person, because I literally went from 9 to 5 to the business that I'm building now. So I think what is most important is vision. Again, it takes me back to what I was saying earlier about examples. When we see what is possible in the market, then our minds, it's just easier for us to think bigger when we see what is possible in the market. And usually what we've seen in the past is people who seemingly come out of nowhere, build a career in content creation, and we think that that's the way to go. But the more you interrogate or the more you talk to these people, you realize that this person had a job. And while they had their job, they were pursuing their passion in content creation. But the passion or the content creation career became so big that they had to leave their job and focus on this. That's usually the formula that works. Not that, you go to school and then you don't have anything going for you and you just start creating content. Those are anomalous cases. That's not the norm. The norm is someone has something that they are doing through which they are sustaining themselves, a 9 to 5, a side business, whatever it is, but they are also creating content. And those two things are existing side by side. Now, the content creation business sometimes, and this is not in all cases, but sometimes grows so big that you can no longer do the job. And you're getting so much money from this, or you're getting a lot of opportunities that you think can give you way more money in the future. So that's usually the formula, and I think that is the balance. Again, speaking as someone who, I started my newsletter, I had a job, a 9 to 5, I started my newsletter, and then the newsletter grew 10,000 subscribers, 20,000 subscribers, 30,000 subscribers, and today we just crossed the 45,000 subscriber mark. And now, because I have seen that there is a business to be built as a newsletter first media and intelligence company, I can leave my 9 to 5 and then focus on this. Again, because I have seen that there is a business here. I have made money here and there, and now I'm making money consistently from it. So I would say to anybody out there who wants to build a career, I think, first of all, work within a structured system, within a structured environment. Because what that teaches you is, it teaches you operations. It teaches you accountability. It teaches you how to run a business, how to manage people, how to work with people. Because if you don't have all of these experiences, you find out that you just very quickly fail, or you fall by the wayside. So again, start from somewhere with structure. That's always going to be my advice to anybody who wants to build a career in content, and then grow from there. The other part of this is you don't necessarily have to be the person creating the content. You can find somebody who has potential and grow with them, or build them up, or just support them. One of my favorite examples is Asika, Davido's business partner. Davido is the creative guy. Issa is the business guy. I mean, it's quite possible that Issa has the potential to be a musician, but instead, what he's dedicated himself to doing is to make sure that this person who has all of this fame, all of this talent, has a structure and a business behind him that can help him grow. And Issa is successful in his own right. So I think a lot more people need to think more about how they can be the operations person or be the backbone or the structural provider to the other content creators that then go on and take over the world. And in the process, you find out that you make a lot of money. I mean, I feel way more satisfied now that I'm behind the scenes and not writing all the time versus when I was the one doing the writing all the time. So again, it's about what you know that is possible and how you attack it.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I mean, that last one should be a mantra, but we'll get to that. But Harry, still talking about balance, right? Another dilemma that we're facing, especially with the, growing of a newer generation, we've even gone beyond Gen Z now, it's Gen Alpha.
Yeah.
What's happening is that we have squeezed digital footprint and thrown it out the window. We're sitting comfortably on the table of moral decadence, right? So people no longer care what they put out there. They don't care. If you tell them the internet never forgets a million times, they really don't care. In fact, some people actually want to put out detrimental, derogatory things about themselves to get clout. There's no longer self-respect. We're literally treading in muddy waters, and that's just all to get the numbers. Again, like I said, speaking on balance, do you think that the lack of regulation, the lack of enough regulation in this part of the world is one of the leading causes of all of this? Because I feel like if there were measures put in place that would prevent some things or not allow some things to be put out there, it would have been a little bit more controlled.
Yes, partially. I think that the legal framework is key in sort of making sure that a lot of young persons nowadays really consider how they can share more mindfully, create more mindfully, and just have morals, in the middle of what they do. And for the first time in a very long time, Nigeria has recognized the place of creative economy, and you would see that evidenced by the creation of the new Ministry of Arts, Culture, Tourism and Creative Economy. And you see that there is a lot of work in progress in putting most of this framework that is necessary for the sector to blossom currently in place. I think that as young people, Gen Alpha, as we like to call them, they need to create more mindfully, they need to share more mindfully. Because personally myself, there are some things I do not consume, right? And there are some things that when they come to me, it ends with me. I don't share them or forward them as most persons would do. I think we have to really look at how we can sort of even encourage the growth of young creators or young creatives that create much more tangible and much more valuable content. I would also reference content that I've seen lately that maybe body shames women or picks on young persons living with disabilities, or just even shame a particular part of the economy right now. There's no reason why those sort of content should be having lots of likes or lots of reactions. There needs to be a way to censor most of these contents from not reaching as much audience as possible. So I also believe that the federal ministry is putting a lot of structures in place to make sure that the creative sector in Nigeria, right, achieve its full potential and just mitigate some of the risk that most of these unmindful, contents can contribute. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. I mean, it's been a very insightful conversation so far, and we're nowhere near done. But in the meantime, we want to go on a short break. This is Super Final Africa, and we're talking about the creative industry and the fact that there's so much more to creativity than the young people think. We're also talking about the pros and cons of it. So you don't want to miss the rest of this conversation. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. You're still live with us on Fafanwa Africa, and we're still talking about the creative industry and why the young people need to look beyond content creation, as there's a whole business in the creative space. I still have my amazing guests, amazing gentlemen who are with me in the studio. David Adeleke, the founder, Communicate, and I also have Harry Kasiena, Country Program Manager, Arts and Culture, British Council. All right, that said, I would like for us to go straight to the next question, which, my guests seem to be very interested in, and that is the conversation of funding options that are available to young creatives and how they can access them. So I'll start with David.
I think it's best to start with Harry, but
I don't mind opening the floor.
Okay, then, okay.
Harry can start because this is his domain.
All right, then let's have Harry open the floor.
Yeah. If you look at other sectors, right? If you look at Greek, if you look at healthcare, if you look at even IT, right? A certain inflow of finance unlocks the next level of the boom of those sectors. But the creative sector still suffers from being recognized as a, what's the right term now? Maybe David can help me with the right term.
An industry?
Yeah, an industry, right, that requires such funding to unlock its economic potential. And the creative sector sits in the middle of a whole lot of other industries, right? You have finance, you have tech, you have legal, right? You have operations that sits in the middle. And the creative economy sits in the middle of all of that with all of these other supports, So if you are going on the film set, for instance, you know that you need to get a lawyer involved. And getting a lawyer involved, is sort of also generating revenue for that lawyer. You know that you need operations, you need logistics, But the industry is not yet being recognized as that driver of economic growth, So when we also further look at the creative sector and the inability of young creatives to even access funding, it now goes back to what is important for these young creatives to access funding. I was in a conversation 3 weeks ago, and someone from BOI stated that they still struggle to see, to evaluate, IP, right? They still struggle to see that the young creative has that bankable guarantee that gives them the access to most of these funding mechanisms, which further begs the question, right? How long will it take for an IP to be recognized as a bankable guarantee? And when you look at a film script, for instance, or a music catalog, or the artwork of a visual artist, one would think that it has the potential to start having conversations around finance and also around funding. But yeah, I'll pass it back to David and see where we
Okay, I'm just in the middle of the baton.
So, good point Harry has made. And this is a conversation that we both have been having, but I've also been having with a lot of my friends who work in the financial sector. So we have this collection of banks now who are very interested in funding creative economy projects, and even not just banks, investors. I speak with investors all the time. How do we evaluate the value, or how do we evaluate an intellectual property? How do we estimate the worth of this intellectual property within a market where IP protection laws are still very weak? So again, I think the first problem that we need to solve is how do we protect intellectual property? And I'm glad that the Ministry of Arts, Culture, Tourism and the Creative Economy has this as a priority, putting in place the frameworks that help creatives generally to safeguard their intellectual property. Then the next question is, all right, so now the IP is safe. How do we determine the value of it? And I think one of the things that we can do a lot of is to already look at things that have worked in the market and build financial models based on the things that have worked in the market. So a financial model will look at the quality or the nature of the intellectual property, the source of the intellectual property. This filmmaker, for instance, where do they come from? Can we find people with similar backgrounds? How can we make it replicable? If you look at the music industry, this is one of the things that the music industry has been able to do well. That's why, for instance, record labels can go to certain parts of the country, find talent from those places, and essentially using a formula. You may not be aware that there is a formula, but they know that there is a formula. Using the same formula, you have 3 or 4 people doing the same, in quote, kind of music with the same kind of personality, generating near almost similar income patterns. So we need to be able to build those models. And I think the more we do that, then the better we get at evaluating IP. But the first step is we need to get better at protecting people's intellectual property. And that in itself is a policy conversation. There has to be more lobbying at the local and at the national and the international level. So again, so first of all, we protect IP, then we find ways to build models that can predict the value of intellectual property, and that unlocks the market in a new dimension.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I think another question, and this is one of the things that piques my interest, is the fact that recently we have it's like a wave of making people popular and then asking afterwards, how did this guy even become popular? So in the sense that people are amused by different things. I remember during the COVID era, it was slow motion on TikTok. Slow-mo videos just started, people just enjoyed slow-mo videos. And then you'll be asking yourself, how is this even a brand? What does this represent? So I think it leads me to my question. Do you think, Harry, that we have a sellable brand, and this is not collectively now, but individually, depending on the niche, as Nigerians, do we have a brand that we can sell to the international world without them asking, what's this about? So, do we have a strong enough online and offline and global presence as creatives?
I have a lot of thoughts about that. And someone asked me a question recently. The person asked, what would it take to have a unicorn in the creative industry? And the question was just really funny because when you look at the practice, or rather the behavioral attitude of young creatives, I would dare to say that they lack a lot of what makes a unicorn, right? And also most recently, the British Council wanted to support young creatives to go to a southern African country to provide access to market for them. And a lot of the creatives that we wanted to offer this opportunity to could not justify their accounting records, right? And it was just very simple. We asked a simple question. Can you provide your credit history, right, your accounting records, to be able to ascertain if you even have the financial capability to support your entry into these new markets? And a lot of them were printing their bank statements, their financial bank statements, their personal bank statements to use as a supporting evidence. But that wasn't really the case, right? Having a document or an Excel sheet that shows your inflow and outflow would have sufficed it for us. But most of them did not even have, the structure in place to properly document their processes that is currently existing in their business. So when I really think of if Nigerian creative has the global appeal internationally or even regionally, right? We have the potential to have that appeal, right? But as a matter of fact, we are not there yet. And what will get us there quickly is to be accountable to ourselves and to our businesses. Also be accountable to the future of your business as well, right? What is the practice you are starting with as you set up your business and your brand? Is it a practice that you can keep to and sustain over a period of time? Is something that we also have to look at as well. And if you also look at it from another approach, you usually see the staggering number of how Africa population is increasing or of how Nigeria population is increasing. And the question that always comes to mind when I hear these figures are creative entrepreneurs preparing for the market of Africa? Are they preparing for the market of Nigeria? Or are they seeing that they have to go to the UK first, or they have to go to the US first before they hit that unicorn status? There's a lot of potential here. There's also a lot of people here that can benefit from the product or service that the creative is offering. And then there's the other question around disposable income, right? Does the population of Nigeria or Africa has the purchasing power to patronize the goods and services of a creative entrepreneur, right? And to that question, I always ask and say, why not build a product that can fit into that disposable income or the purchasing power of your target audience, here in Nigeria? And we are seeing a lot of businesses doing it already. Look at Dangote, for instance. His major profits, right, are made from businesses that is currently based here in Nigeria. He's not going to set up a refinery in South Africa or the UK. He's setting it right here in Nigeria to appeal to the local masses, right? So I think it is a way to also look at it. But happy for David to input on that as well.
David?
He's a media guy, so I'm sure he has some
Media
narrative,
perspective.
yeah.
So from my perspective, Harry, you're right when you say Nigeria has the potential, but I also think we have the means. What we don't quite have is the supporting system or the supporting structure. And I don't also think that this, and this speaks to Harry's point, I don't think that we have the sustainability to consistently appeal to a global audience. Now, we will do this in bits and pieces. I'll give you some examples. You look at, even within Afrobeats, which is the example we all like to use, it's not every Afrobeats artist that has global appeal. It's just it's 5%, less than 5%
Less
of
than
them
5, actually.
have global appeal. So it's not all of them. When we talk about Afrobeats and global appeal, it's really just 5% of the crop. Then you look at film as well. In the last 10 years, maybe the Nigerian movies that have had international success or appeal, The Black Book, Anikulapo, Lionheart, and there's not that many. So again, the potential is there, the seeds are there, but we do not have the systems and the structures that make these things consistent. Even in fashion, you think of Banke Kuku, you think of, Fisaya Longa is based in the UK, but I will claim her as Nigerian for the purpose of this conversation. And then you have the brand that owns Knock by Alara. So there are all of these different potentials, but we don't have these systems. Now, so the conversation really needs to be about how do we put the systems in place that help us, yes, to benefit locally, but also help us to take some of the things that we've built here and get them out of the country, get them into international markets. And I'm not just talking about the diaspora. I'm talking about international markets. We have Canada, we have the UK, we have the US, we have Brazil, we have different countries in Asia that are interested in Nigerian cultural goods. What systems have we put in place to get our goods from this country and to those other markets? I think those are the questions that we really need to start asking ourselves, and we need answers to.
Okay, I'm tempted to whether or not to ask this last question. Okay, but in 1 minute, Harry, where do you see the creative industry in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oof.
I was going to have the same reaction.
That temptation, you should have allowed temptation to prevail. But yeah, in the next 5 years, I know that a lot of young creatives are taking a much more community approach in terms of how they create their arts. You barely see creatives that are going at it in isolation at the moment. They understand the value of having a united front, and they understand the value of being a part of communities that supports their growth. So, and when you also look at it as well, the global economy is shifting to the fruits that the creative industry and creative economy can bring, worldwide. And Nigeria is not separate from that. Young creatives are beginning to see the value of their arts. They are beginning to take a lot of things more seriously, like funding structure, IP, distribution. How do I get my goods from point A to point B? They are taking conversations such as the AFCFTA agreement more seriously. They're trying to understand how it works and how it can be beneficial to them. And then when you also look at the other supporting industries as well, you have legal, and then you have the creative arm of the legal practice. So you have the accounting arm of the legal. You have the accounting arm of the creative economic practice as well. A lot of these other much more professional. A lot of these professional art forms and professional businesses, they now see the role that they play in the creative sector. So in the next 5 years, we would be moving 10% better than where we are now, 10, 20% better than where we are now. We are also seeing that fashion, music, and film is taking center stage globally. We are seeing visual arts also coming up fast behind all of that as well. So in the next 5 years, we'll be in a better place. we would have seen the outputs of the federal ministry, we would have seen the various initiatives that they have put in place to have much more tangible outcomes. And then when you look at the music scene in Nigeria and the possibility of having, live centers for shows and various performances to happen, we'll now see how that will contribute to the economic growth of Nigeria. When you look at fashion, fashion is taking center stage. We are owning, a lot of our cultural identity. You see a wave of ashoke, adire, and all other, form of fabric that is Nigeria-owned, taking center stages globally. So there's going to be a rise in that as well. When you even look at film, we are also making, waves globally in terms of the kind of films that we produce. So I think in 5 years we'll be in a much more better place.
Hopefully so. Amen to that. Thank you so much. I mean, I think this is a perfect place to end the conversation. I'd have loved for us to continue, but I mean, it's more of what we need to see than what we need to talk about. So thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you, David Adeleke, founder, Communicate. And of course, thank you to Harry Kesiena, Country Program Manager, Arts and Culture, British Council, for joining us and sharing your thoughts on the creative industry. We appreciate your time with us. That said, that's all we can take on for FANWA today, but do also join us in our subsequent episode as we will be tackling the issues that concern the youths, especially on the African continent, and of course, preferring solutions to them as well. My name is Blessings Musugu, and it's been an absolute pleasure being your host on the show today. Join us again on another episode. Till then, have a lovely day.